Judge Piet Koen is today expected to hand down his ruling in the High Court in Pietermaritzburg in former President Jacob Zuma's application for the recusal of State Prosecutor Advocate Billy Downer. The application is part of the special plea Zuma entered into in the corruption case against him. Zuma and French arms company Thales face charges of corruption, racketeering and money laundering in connection with South Africa's multi-billion rand arms deal in 1999. Zuma's legal team has argued that Downer is biased against him. For more on this, we cross live now to our colleague Ayanda Mhlongo. A very good morning to you, Ayanda. Set the scene for us just in terms of what's happening in court this morning.
Yeah, very good morning to you, Desiree, and good morning to our viewers at home. Well, an important day for former President Jacob Zuma. And let me start by updating our viewers, Desiree, at home, that we weren't expecting the former president to be present in court today. Of course, there was that social media tweet by his foundation just last week where they had indicated that the former president was not going to be in court. Instead, his lawyers were going to be present, as of course today he is going to be awaiting the judgment by Judge Piet Koen as to whether or not the court will rule in his favor to seek the recusal of the state prosecutor in this matter, in this criminal matter, Advocate Billy Downer. But at around 8:30 this morning, a former president entering into the court said a very important day for him today. And let me now bring in my colleague Pietermaritzburg just to speak about the former president's presence here this morning at the Pietermaritzburg High Court. Pietermaritzburg, morning. Thanks very much for your time. We saw former President Jacob Zuma coming into court this morning. We weren't expecting him to be here. You were there as he walked in. I know that some members of the media did try to pose some questions to him. Just take us through.
Well, indeed, Ayanda, an important day, as you rightfully put it in your introduction, for the former president as he makes his appearance here ahead of that crucial judgment, I might add, Ayanda. But when we saw the former president walking up the stairs, Ayanda, he was not his usual self. He was very weak. He appeared to be very frail, walking up the stairs very slowly. Even when some of the members of the media were just basically greeting him, you could hear that he's not actually his usual self. Of course, Ayanda, last week he was also here laying charges against the state prosecutor advocate Billy Downer. So I suppose that these matters are taking a toll on his health as a whole, Ayanda.
Any word from the foundation? Of course, the spokesperson of the foundation, Jimmy Mani, I beg your pardon, Zwanele Mani, has been present in court. He was here the last court appearance, even though the former president was not here, and he speaks on behalf of the former president.
Certainly, Ayanda, at this very moment, the only statement that has been issued by the foundation is that of confirming former President Jacob Zuma's presence here at the Pietermaritzburg High Court. But in terms of the usual supporters that your Duduzile Zuma, the people who usually surround the former president when he makes these court appearances, today he was just walking by himself, flanked of course by his security personnel. But the foundation has not said if they will be sending anyone to be here present in court today.
All right, Simpure, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much. My colleague there, Pietermaritzburg, who of course was inside the court when the former president arrived this morning, just speaking about how he appeared and that he was looking frail. And though members of the media did try to pose questions to the former president, he did not take any questions. The court, of course, is expected to get underway at around 9:30 this morning. And of course, while the focus is going to be on what is happening inside the court and this very important judgment, particularly for the former president, Jacob Zuma, but outside the court precincts, as we've seen in previous appearances, there is a heavy police presence. In fact, the main road just outside the court has been cordoned off by police deployment. To also see that apart from the police here in KwaZulu-Natal, it looks like there are additional police deployments from other provinces as well. So certainly access as well into the courtroom is restricted to those individuals who only have been given accreditation to be inside the court. And of course, being the fact that the court has to comply with the COVID-19 regulations, the numbers of people as well that are allowed inside the court court are limited to ensure that they do adhere to the COVID-19 regulations. My colleagues in Pua mentioning there that just last week, former President Jacob Zuma opened a criminal case against Advocate Billy Downer, where he accused him of leaking confidential information relating to his health. Now, the former president, when opening that case against Advocate Billy Downer, saying that he feels, or accusing Advocate Billy Downer of misconduct. It wasn't the first time that he has made mention. Of course, this application as well is also around the conduct of Advocate Billy Downer, but also in that saying that he had written to the president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, to raise his complaints or concerns around the conduct of Advocate Billy Downer after he accuses him of leaking that confidential information around his medical health. And he then said that the president of the country then has not responded, or had responded, but by only saying that the matter would be referred to the Department of Justice. And since August, according to the foundation, the Department of Justice had not come back to the former president, and so he was left with no option but then to go to the police to open that case. But whether or not the case that the former president has now opened against Advocate Billy Downer will have any bearing in terms of the case, let me now bring in our legal expert, Mpumelelo Zigalala, to just share his analysis and take us through what we can expect in court today. But before I get to that, Mpumelelo, thanks very much for your time this morning as well. Just before I get that, very interestingly, with what happened last week when the former president opened this criminal case now against Advocate Billy Downer, accusing him of misconduct, but particularly, obviously, this case relates to the leaking of confidential information related to his health. The NPA, in his response, said that they were concerned about the timing of the case that had been of this case that had been opened by the former president. Now, speak us through, when I asked the foundation on the day that the former president opened the case, whether or not this was another delay, a delay tactic on behalf of the former president, in the sense that if the court rules in favor, or if the court rules against the former president and Advocate Billy Downer continues as the lead prosecutor in this case, what would then happen with regards to this criminal case? It will still continue. It must be taken as a separate case concerning to what we are here for. Let's remember, when the submissions, legal submissions through affidavits and also verbally were made, this particular crime was not, or this incident was not reported as yet. So in making its decision today, Judge Koen is not going to take into consideration whatever that has been taken in that particular case. So it's going to be a separate case altogether. It will have no bearing on this one. What it may have a bearing on moving forward is this one. When the trial is being started, your Section 35 rights are utmost important, and they must be protected at all times. So what is important is that at the end of the day, the NPA would have a conundrum. Do they want to continue with someone who may be potentially be tainted, who will not be able to prosecute this particular matter objectively in the eyes of the public, in the eyes of the media? Do they want to continue with someone who is tainted again and has criminal charges that have been laid against him? However, that must also be read into context. A person is free to open a case at any particular point in time. So if the incident occurred after the submissions here at court, it's only right that a person will go to court after that particular incident and then say, I'm laying a charge in terms of you contravening the NPA Act. What I'm worried about is the previous leaks, which is the signing of the affidavit that was used by, I think it was the Democratic Alliance in the reopening of this particular case. That particular case must be investigated, because it then means you have a member of the NPA who has sworn his allegiance to the NPA, who has obtained confidential information or privileged information and has shared it with third parties. Now the question is, in what circumstances can that be allowed? Are there even any circumstances in which that particular process should be allowed? If the answer is no, then that particular conduct must be looked into, because we may start with one today, however it may develop into a habit, in which I'm sure the NPA and even our courts would like to say, we want to make sure that you stick to the rules as they've been written. If anyone has transgressed, let's deal
deal with that particular person and punish them accordingly.
You listened to the arguments that were put forth by former President Jacob Zuma's defense team over the 2 days that they argued this matter. And one of the points that you had raised the last time we spoke, and maybe you can just remind our viewers again, was your concern around the timing of this application being brought before the court.
Let's remember when there are two interpretations, the narrow and the wide one. Narrow one of saying we're only looking at title in terms of procedural documentation. Do we have the required qualifications and documentation? In this case, you're employed by the NPA as advocate plea. There's no question around that. Or the wider one in terms of looking, let's look into your conduct. We are guided by case law in that, in terms of the Porridge Act, which is very clear in terms of saying, if you want to deal with the conduct of the prosecutor, do it within this particular point in to the trial, and make sure that you are able to lament those points as you go along. If you can't do that, then this particular application may or has a greater chance of failing if they haven't met that particular test. And by that I mean the legal rep of the former president.
For argument's sake today, if the court rules against the former president, what then would happen? Would he then have any further recourse to then take the matter to a higher court?
There is further recourse in terms of saying they want to appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeals. That particular application will have to start with Judge Koen. And if he feels that maybe they can get a different ruling, then they'll say, I'm granting you permission. If he refuses it, they can still petition the Supreme Court of Appeals. Again, if they're not allowed to go there, that application is refused, you still have the Concord, because the argument will be, what we are fighting for, it is so pertinent and so core to this matter. We can't continue with it and ignore it and deal with it at a later stage. We can't have a person who is not supposed to prosecuting this matter, because it's going to be a travesty of justice moving forward. So we want to make sure that we have ironed out all those issues before we start, so that at the end of the day, we make sure that we have brought a person who is prosecuting, that ought to be prosecuting, that complies with the NPA Act. If that hasn't happened, please protect my Section 35 right. I think that's what the former president will say.
For some people who say, well, the former president clearly has issues and concerns around Advocate Billy Downer, although the NPA has said they stand by him and they're going to support and they were going to fight this application. They believed in Advocate Billy Downer. Of course, he has the knowledge of this case, having dealt with it since 2015. Yes. But some people would argue, well, why doesn't the NPA simply remove Advocate Billy Downer and bring in another prosecutor? Is it that simple?
For me, it would be that simple, and then it cuts out all this particular noise around Advocate Billy Downer. Remember, when he's not the lead prosecutor, someone else will step in. However, you still have access to his knowledge, you still have access to his institutional memory of this particular case, and also of the case of Mr. Shabir Sheikh. So he's not lost into the system, or he can't be used by anyone. He can still participate and still provide the type of intervention and input into the matter as he would have done. The only difference is that he is not the person who is leading. But what I think the NPA could be saying, we don't want to create a precedent where someone will make an application to remove a prosecutor and we are not going to fight or oppose it. Let's make sure that we have built our legal precedents. It is very clear as to when a prosecutor should be removed, so that at the end of the day, we don't find ourselves having to chop and change prosecutors at the instance of the accused saying that I do not trust this person is going to be biased against me.
Some legal experts have said this is nothing else but another step to delay the case. You'd know that previously the